Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Friday.
it is.
And what a heck of a week it's been. Wait, should we do the clap?
Oh, yeah. Hang on.
Get it right?
No, hang on.
That's right. That's right. Because that's kind of like
buddy.
a signature thing now, right?
It is. It is.
We got Gene Brock here tonight. And I'll tell you what, this guy, he's like kind of almost like a legend here. Now, this gentleman is a honky tonk singing fool. I'll tell you what. Not
hardcore.
Only hardcore. Not only that, but this gentleman has got some stuff going on in his backyard, but in the woods around him as well. This guy's an anthropologist, believe it or not. After his first sighting, he decided that he wanted to research this stuff with Bigfoot. And we've got him on tonight to talk about all of that, his team, and more. So we're going to kind of get to see a little bit different side of the Bigfoot phenomenon through his eyes, you know? So I'm excited for that tonight. What do you think there, Tim?
I'm totally stoked. Yeah, I'm any point of view and any different angle on this sort of stuff is always interesting. And I love hearing new ways of looking at it. And yeah, I'm stoked.
All right. So we're going to pull him in, but let's welcome everybody in before that.
You betcha. So, of course, hey, race fans in first place and gold medal position. That's a surprise. Road Flare, how you doing? Good to see you tonight. Eternity Eternal, thank you for coming in. Frankie B. And we got Keith McCormick also. Oh, Tim James, is it? That's a Tim James guy. Doesn't matter. And it is. And Mel, WD-40, lubing us up because, as Dave always says, nobody likes to go into a show nice and rigid. That lube is super important. Kitty Cattywax. Kitty Cattywax in the house tonight. Thank you for coming in. And Dragonfly. Cosmic Joe Chronicles, Mark Sanchez. Good to see you, sir. I hope you're feeling good tonight. And I think we're getting down to the bottom of the list. And Joanne is here.
Lars Larson from Sweden.
That's right. And I think we're just about there. So we'll get some more people in, I'm sure, in the next little bit. But hello to everybody, and thanks for coming out and joining us on Element 115.
And Spaced Out Radio. Hey, and not only that, can you guys do me a favor in chat? Can you tell me where you're from? Because that's going to help me in the future too. You know, cool. If I want to razz you a little bit about this or that, it's helpful if I know where you're from. So help me out there, because everybody needs a little hazing and a little razzing every once in a while. Anyway, so we are going to go ahead and run our intro. And let me tell you guys, it's a little bit different. I've changed it up a little bit. There's a little bit something special in there for y'all and for us, and we're about to share it with you. So here goes the
Oh, dear Lord, it's these two ass clowns again. Well, now that you're here, you might as well sit down and get comfortable.
Welcome to the dimension of the unknown, where the imagination reigns supreme, crafting worlds and realities that defy the limitations of our mortal coil. Beyond the veil of reality, there exists a realm that defies the boundaries of human perception. Certain places beckon with an otherworldly allure, stirring the senses and whispering secrets of a dimension that lies just beyond the threshold of our mundane existence. The air is alive with an electric anticipation, as if the next step might unravel the very fabric of reality, plunging us into an abyss from which there is no return. This realm is a boundless expanse, as infinite as the cosmos and as timeless as the ages. It inhabits the twilight zones of existence, where the glow of knowledge and the shadows of ignorance entwine like lovers in a cosmic dance. Here, the rational and the mystical converge, suspended between the depths of human terror and the pinnacle of our understanding. Welcome to Element 115.
We're back, and Gene is with us. Gene, welcome to the show. We are happy that you're here. And man, it sounds like you've been doing this for a while, this whole Bigfoot thing. Why don't you start by just telling us how you got into this? What happened to you to make you want to research this stuff?
Okay, well, first, thanks for the intro. That was a lot of good hype there. I've got a lot to live up to now. So, my first foray into the Bigfoot world happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. My father was a long haul truck driver, and he was taking a load of produce from, I believe it was Michigan, down to Florida. And as he come through Kentucky, there's a mountain that separates Tennessee and Kentucky. It's called Jellicoe Mountain. It is on Interstate 75. Well, there was a guy that was following my father, and he hollered on the CB radio that a Bigfoot had just crossed behind my dad's truck. And he went as far as to telling the people on the opposite side of the interstate, I believe they were heading north, but the people on the southbound side to watch that thing that was fixing to cross the interstate. Well, they got to riding him so bad, he just eventually shut up and wouldn't even talk. Well, he wound up passing my father going down the hill, and they pulled into a truck stop, and Dad got out and was talking to him. And he said the guy was white as a ghost, and his hand was shaking a little bit. And Dad said, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear? Because there is black bear in that country." And he said, "Damn it, man, I live in Nashville, North Carolina. I know what a bear looks like." So then when Dad come home and told me the story, that was when I learned about Sasquatch. So I was always fascinated with it from that point forward. But in my mind, it was a one, there was one Bigfoot. It was an 8-foot tall creature, walked around on 2 legs, and that was it. So fast forward till I'm about, 13, 14 years old. And we're deer hunting in Muhlenberg, Kentucky, on Peabody Coal Company, which is, at that time, it was 62,000 acres of reclaimed coal land that nobody did anything on. They would go out there every now and then, scratch around in the dirt to keep their permits current, but that was about it. That's where the John Prine song come from. Take me back to Muhlenberg County. That's where it come from. As a matter of fact, the quote about the world's largest shovel, my dad was there when that shovel turned over, and they just left it. It took all day for it to lay down on its side because the ground gave away from it, and it just slowly laid down. But anyway, so we're hunting there. It's I believe it's the 3rd weekend of November, because deer season is 3 weeks long. It may have just been 2 weeks then, but anyway, it was about the 3rd weekend of November. And I'm standing in a large field, because that's the way it is, where they strip mine, it grows into a field, and then surrounding it is what we called spoil banks, where they dump the tailings or the scrapings out. So I'm standing there, and my dad had went to this holler that was off to the west of me. Now, it's an original holler. It had never been mined, so it's old growth holler. And you can see through it forever. It's wide open, big, tall timber. And it's that way all the way down through there, except right at the very bottom where there is a wet season spring. So sometimes there's a small creek that runs through there. And in that area, it's growed up with brush pretty heavily and thick. But I'm standing there. It's about 3:30, 4 o'clock, somewhere in that area, and I hear my father shoot. I know it's his gun. I've hunted with him my whole life. I know what it sounds like. But he shoots 3 times. And it's not the distress signal of 3 rapid shots. It is 3 intentionally aimed boom, boom, boom shots. And what struck me as weird, because my father was the type of hunter that when he saw a deer, there was one shot and the deer was on the ground. So I go over to the edge of the field where I can see down in the holler, thinking maybe the deer are going to run toward me and I can get a shot at one too. So I go over there and I'm standing there, and I stand there probably, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and I don't see nothing, but I start hearing people talking. And it's very plain that it's two individuals speaking. It's got a very flowing cadence to it. You know, I can't say it's sapient sentences, but it's very flowing, sounds just like any of us standing around talking. But it's right on the edge of my hearing, so I can't make out what they're saying. So I think, okay, he's got a deer down. There's somebody else down there. I'm going to go down and see if I can help. So I start walking down through there, and I'm kind of going down the holler as I'm going long ways down it, traversing from the top to the bottom. And I get about 50, 60 yards, something like that, from the bottom of the holler where that brushy area is. Now I'm not hearing a sound. There's nothing running through the woods, nothing like that. But all at once, two animals bust out of the brush, running right straight at me. They're, like I said, it's not the typical Bigfoot experience. It's not an 8 foot tall, upright walking creature. They're both on all fours. They're in a quadruped motion. The rear haunches are lower than the front shoulders. So it's what we would now refer to as knuckle walking, or a facsimile thereof. The leg, the hips come down, and then the thigh bone goes up to the kneecap, and then it comes back down, type, you know, kind of like a track runner would be when they first start to take off. Or just look up a ape knuckle walking, and that's real similar to what they were doing. And when they come charging out at me, and I hate to use the word charge, because I think I was just in their way. I just happened to be where they were running to, because there was no snarling, there was no teeth being shown or anything like that. It's just like you jumped a deer, except instead of running the other direction, it's running at me. But like I said, they were on all fours, no visible ears. The face was flat. They appeared to have 3.5, 4 inch long, reddish brown hair hanging all over them. You could see it hanging down their arms as they were walking along. And in my 13, 14-year-old mind, I didn't know what it was. You know, like I said, Bigfoot was an 8 foot tall monster that lived in Oregon, you know. And so I guess I'm kind of freaked out a little bit, because I remember the thought going through my mind, I don't know what this is. It needs to die. And so I pulled my gun up, and I don't even think I aimed. I just shot at them. And I shot a total of 3 times. I don't know if I shot 2 times to begin with, or 1 time and then 2 times after. But after I pulled that first shot, be it 1 or 2, there was a big noise behind me. And I remember thinking, crap, they've got me surrounded. So I spun around to see what was coming at me from behind, and it was a gray squirrel going up a hickory tree about 5 foot from my head. So he sounded like a bulldozer coming through the woods. So I see that, and I spin back around at the danger that I know is coming at me. And these animals are so fast that they have already crossed back through the brush and are halfway up the holler on the opposite side. And this is not a small holler. I mean, it's steep, and they're already back across the bottom and going up. And I shot, like I said, either once or twice more at that point. I shot a total of 3 times. I just don't know what the sequence was. I can't remember how it actually went. But that was pretty much the extent of that sighting. And I saw that, and I was like, okay, I'm going back to the field where I can see for hundreds of yards all the way around me, and Dad can drag his own deer out. So, like I said, it really didn't freak me out because I did finish the whole night's hunt. You know, even being 13, 14 years old, I wasn't scared, you know. As far as I'm concerned, I'm packing a 30-06. It'll kill anything I can encounter. So I finish hunting. I go back to camp after dark. Me and my dad get to talking, and he shot at these animals as well. This was what he was shooting at. And now when they charged out of the brush, I like to say it's when they saw me, they started talking back and forth to each other.
Gotcha.
And these animals, these two individuals, was what I heard talking, because my dad never encountered anybody in that holler and never said a word to anybody. Now, like I said before, when I first heard them, when they were a long distance away, they had a structural cadence to them. Now, when they started making noise when they come out of the brush, it was more like excited chimpanzees. You know, it was just a lot of that noise, just like if you were in the jungle and you suddenly walked up on a tribe of chimpanzees and they saw you and they started doing their squawking. There was no cadence to it. It was just, they were walking on top of each other with their voices. And I guess the one thing that I've always kind of had issue with for this whole thing was, were they squalling at each other, or were they calling for mom and dad that was close that I never saw? That's always been a trouble spot in the back of my head, you know, because like the squirrel that run up the tree, he was 5 foot from me. Why had he not run up that tree before that? You know, and so was there something else there and I still didn't see it? I don't know. I'm just speculating at that point. But, you know, people talk about the woods going quiet and everything. Well, the woods were quiet when I went into them. My father's down in the holler somewhere shooting a 30-06. There was nothing happening in the woods anyway. But when I say that the woods were quiet, I mean, I did not hear the animals running through the woods. Now, they could have been in that dry creek bed and not really making much noise running up the gravel and the rocks that were there. Somebody asked me once, well, maybe they were sitting there and run out when they saw you. And I'm like, well, you know, you judge that on any other animal you would encounter. You wouldn't run at the danger that you're seeing. You would run away from it. So in my mind, I don't think there was any malice from them. I just happened to be in their way as they come through. Because there was never, like I said, there was no snarling, there was no snapping of teeth or anything like that. And as a matter of fact, they didn't make no sound until they cleared the brush real well and kind of locked eyes on me. Yeah. And I mean, this happened real quick. Because like I said, I was only 50, 60 yards from it to begin with. And as fast as they were moving, they probably covered 20 before I got my gun yanked up.
Jeez.
And even though I discharged my weapon, I really didn't feel threatened. It was more one of them deals where I don't know what this is, and the only way I'm going to figure it out is to kill one so I can take it somewhere and figure out what it is, you know. And we kind of operated under the impression that it was a wolf or some canine for a long time. I think maybe it made everybody feel better, because we had hunted there for years and we continued to hunt there. As a matter of fact, I hunted there last year. So, you know, we've never stopped hunting in the area. And there's a huge coyote population. We hear, you know, packs of them howling all the time. You kill a deer and you gut it and you go back that evening or the next morning, the gut pile's gone. But there's always been the occasional super deep, super loud howl that we would hear And we were like, man, that was a huge coyote, or but like I said, I was always fascinated with the subject anyway. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind that these animals existed. We'd be going to a tree stand, in the dark of a morning, or just walking through the woods, and all at once you would hear what we now call a tree knock. You would hear wood contact on wood, or you'd be sitting there and for some reason something starts banging two rocks together. We always said, well, it must be raccoons cleaning something in the creek fixing to eat it, because they don't have salivatory glands, so they wash their food to get it wet. And so that's what we always, blamed it on. Well, that was raccoons banging on a rock or with something, breaking a shell open. But, when you're a half a mile from the closest creek, that's kind of a stretch. But there has always been those types of activities that have happened in that area. If you go to the BFR website, I believe that there is within 3 miles of where I saw these at, there is at least 10 Class A sightings that have happened. So it's a very active area.
Yeah.
And if you look at the BFRO or the Kentucky page that has all the reports and everything on it, the KBRO, they collect stories and stuff too, and so you can find them all on there. But a lot of Muhlenberg, Hopkins, Christian, Logan County, it's kind of an active area. Of course, it's all old strip mine coal land that nobody does anything on, so there's no reason why they wouldn't be there. Food, water, and cover, and it's all right there.
And this all got you into wanting to be an anthropologist.
Well, I think I was always an anthropologist, because I always liked to do what I call people watching. I just didn't know what that was. It's active observation of other people, studying what they're doing and why they're doing it. But when I first got out of high school, I went and got a degree in communications from a 2-year program. And then I played music full time for 10, 12 years. Then I decided, okay, I'm going to go act on this that I've always wanted to. And so that was when I went back to EKU, which is Eastern Kentucky University, got involved with the anthropology program. And of course, there's no grade 8 jobs in Kentucky. So I'm a practicing archaeologist. I have a minor in that. That's what I do. And that gives me opportunity to always be in the woods. We don't do a whole lot of archaeology in town. We do more often than you'd think we do, but 9 times out of 10, it's in a remote area in the woods somewhere.
Gotcha.
I mean, when they're doing a highway and you have to walk 100 miles digging a hole every 60 foot, you cover a lot of ground by foot that way. And so when I'm on a project like that, unless something is really intriguing, during the day, we're contractors. So, it's all archaeology during the day. But at night, instead of laying around a hotel room or going to a bar and getting drunk or something, I go back out into the woods and at least do some knocks, some howls, So I've had the opportunity to do a lot of Bigfoot research and actually get paid for it. Even though I'm technically off the clock, I'm still getting per diem and getting technically paid. So
Perfect.
I may be the only professional that does
You gotta like that.
So, but I have found a few things while doing archaeology. There's a big lake in Kentucky called Cumberland, and it's where they dammed up Cumberland River, and we were working on a project way back up in the woods. Now it was what we call a phase 3. It's where we stay in one spot. Like when you see them in Egypt and they're in the little square pit and they've got their trowel. That's what a phase 2 and a 3 is. So we were doing that, and we had a bulldozer come in and scrape the topsoil off so we could see the area to see what features were visible under the topsoil. So at the end of the project area was all the scrapings that they had scraped up. And I walked over there one afternoon just kind of doing a surface survey to see if anything had been scraped up and was in the pile. And I noticed that there was like 3 holes in the ground. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I don't know what would have done that. And so I'm standing there looking at it, and all at once I kind of shift my focus a little bit to the left and realize that I'm looking at a footprint that's in the mud right beside these 3 holes. And so I immediately drop out of archaeology mode and go into Bigfoot mode, you know. And I'm down on my hands and knees taking pictures of it and measuring it and everything. And I've got all my archaeology, the arrows and everything pointing to north and everything out on it. And of course, I have no plaster of Paris, so there's no chance of doing a cast of it. But I detail it and document it the best I can. And when I go to get up, I put my hand down and I realize that I'm raising up on 3 fingers, right like that. And so I took my fingers and I reached over and I stuck them in the holes that were in the ground. And they were now granted, it was about like doing that number, you know, it's I can move my finger around in a circle.
Hot dog in a hallway type thing.
Right. But I really didn't have to, you know, stretch them out or do anything weird to get them to go in the holes. So I measure my fingers and then I measure the holes to see, you know, and they're about 1.5 inches longer than my fingers are, not counting the width. So the only thing I can figure is this individual, for some reason, was either, because there was only the one footprint that I found. So it was either down on a knee or something. Maybe he was there when we come in early one morning and he crouched down behind this big pile of dirt where he's not seen. And then he raises up and puts his hand just in a very human-like gesture to get up. That's the only thing I can think of. And that site, we had a lot of archaeology is not a quiet process, especially on a phase 3, because the younger kids, the ones that are 20, 25, they think they have to have their cell phone playing music all the time, you know. So half the time we're sitting there and we've got Metallica going in a bucket over here for extra volume to amp it up. But we'd be sitting there and it would almost be like we would hear things in the woods. Like we would hear somebody yell something or somebody say something. As a matter of fact, it was so bad. One time we actually sent 2 people down the trail to see if somebody was trying to find the site and had got lost. But we would hear branches break, which could have been anything, you know. I'm not saying any of that was Bigfoot, just stuff leading up to this. But one day at lunch, one of the other archaeologists on the site, she had some oranges that was going bad. She had 2 of them. And she was going to throw them in the woods. And I said, no, give them to me. And they all knew I was into this. You know, they all loved the subject when nobody else is around, you know. And so I had 2 apples that I took from the hotel breakfast room that morning. So I got me a stick and I poked a hole in all 4 pieces of fruit. And I put an orange on one end, 2 apples, and then another orange. So the apples were booked in by the oranges. And I found a tree that had a notch in it that I could lay them in. It was about 7 foot tall. I'm 6 foot, so reaching up 7 foot and putting them in was no problem. So I just put them in there to see what would happen. Well, the next day we come back, nothing had happened to them. They were just like I had left them. The next day we went back and I could look up and I could see that the orange was still on the stick, but it just looked different than I had left it. So I reached up and pulled it down and the apples were gone, but the oranges had both been put back on the stick. And so that was kind of puzzling for a little while. And I was thinking, okay, a bird would have at least left the cores. They couldn't have ate 2 apples full of, and so I was like, why is this way?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just got to thinking about it, and I finally come to the conclusion, or at least my theory is, I mean, we know that squatches migrate, but there are also the accounts where some of them are habitual. They live in the same spot. So I theorize that if this was a born and bred Kentucky Bigfoot, it had no idea what an orange was.
Yeah,
because we don't grow oranges, but it knew what an apple was. Or maybe it just didn't want the 2 rotten oranges. I don't know. But either way, something had took one of the oranges off and then put it back on and put it back in the tree. And I searched everywhere for, something that had been gifted back.
Right.
That day, I looked the next day, never found nothing. No feathers, no weird out of place rocks. Nothing was ever put back in the tree. So, instead of a gifting situation, it was just, I'm going to take this situation. They gave nothing in return. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Very interesting. And I went out there every night on that project and never heard a sound, never got a knock, a whoop, nothing. But they seemed to be very interested while we were there working. Yeah. I drove out one day to, I don't know what it was. We had to get something, and I drove the truck out. And when I come back in, there's a little dip in the trail road where it crosses a creek. And they had placed a porta potty out near the highway for us, but it's like a half-mile walk to it. But unfortunately, since we had some females on the job site with us, we had to have it. The guys didn't care, but the females had to have it. So I'm coming back in and I get to that dip in the road and I slow down to drive through it. Of course, I've got the windows rolled down and I hear somebody yell, "Hey." And so I'm thinking, okay, somebody's walked to the bathroom. Maybe they want to ride back or want to ride to the bathroom or whatever. Sure. So I crammed the brakes on the truck and I'm looking all around to see who yelled for me. And there is nobody there. There's not a soul. When I do go back to the job site, they're all there present and accounted for. Yeah. But hey is the easiest vocally produced word in the language. So if there ever was a word that a Squatch could produce vocally within a mimicking English manner, it would be hey.
Right.
But I never saw nothing, but I have no, I can't claim that's Bigfoot. It's just one of them weird things that happened at that site. And there's been some other weird things that have happened on archaeological sites, throughout the course of my career, but it's nothing that I would totally contribute to a Bigfoot. It's just a weird thing, like you're standing there going through the woods and all at once there's a tree falls on top of the hill that you're walking beside. It's not windy. Why did that tree suddenly fall?
Right.
Yep, so did something push it over? I don't know. I can't claim it did. But trees normally don't just drop over in the woods. That's just not a tree characteristic. So
I'm tired of standing all these years.
I'm just tired of this. I'm just going to lay down for a while. But
I need a rest.
So, but long story, even longer. That's what led me into being an anthropologist, was encountering these 2 individuals in the woods that day. And like I said, they weren't the standard Bigfoot sighting, but I believe they were juveniles. Mm-hmm. They were not babies, because these creatures were big, regardless of them being on all fours or not. I believe that the front shoulder was at least 3.5 to 4 foot up off the ground. So when they stood up, they were 5-6 foot tall at least. And based on large breed dogs that I've seen and interacted with, they probably weighed somewhere between 180 to 200 pounds in that ballpark. So they were not babies by no means. You know, if they're not babies and they're not adults, then they've got to be juveniles. You know, I obviously have no idea how many years. You know, I like to tell myself that they were teenagers just out romping through the woods having a good time. You know, but I have heard stories about, you know, where people have claimed that an area is where adults drop the babies off, you know, while they go forage or hunt, you know. And this holler being as big as it was and everything, it could have been an area like that. And even though it wasn't traumatic at the moment, I've never stepped foot back in that holler until about 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I'm 53 now. So that's been 40 years that I've hunted all the way around this holler and have never went back into it. And I wouldn't have went back then, but I had my son with me and we'd went out the ridge. And when we come back out, some other hunters had come in and they had a tree stand set up, and I didn't want to blow their hunt. And the other side's kind of a straight drop off cliff. So it was either, okay, walk right underneath their tree stand or go down in this holler. And so, of course, my son loves Bigfoot as much as I do, and I'll get into that in a minute. But so we went down into the holler, and I had 2 30-06s this go around, so I was more comfortable. But that was the only time I went in it, and it was basically because I was forced to. It wasn't because I wanted to go back and visit it. But, you know, like I said, I wasn't traumatized when it happened. Because I went and finished my hunt that evening and then walked to camp in the dark. So it wasn't like I was freaked out and scared.
Got it.
The memory of it has freaked me out and scared me a few other times when I was after the fact, when I was younger. You know, you're sitting in a dark and all at once you hear something big crash over there and you're like, I just wonder.
Don't wonder. So, don't do it.
Right. So, but anyway, that's the story of how I got there.
That's interesting. So my question is, and just because I'm somewhat new at this, I'm just curious. So when they're knuckle walking, like you say they were, now in your experience, and is this like how, I guess, is this an option? Like, do Sasquatch and Bigfoot decide to walk upright or just on down on like knuckles, or is it some sort of like a genetic family trait like certain groups do and certain groups don't?
They have the option of either way that they want to walk, because there's been quite a few reports of squatches dropping down on all fours. As a matter of fact, some people think that they may be even faster on all fours than they are on 2 legs.
Well, if they're anything like a gorilla, I mean, just drawing some sort of a parallel. I mean, yeah, you watch him run like a gorilla when he's up, but when he's down and just giving her, I can imagine that they would be very quick.
Well, that wobble with a gorilla has a lot to do with his hips and his leg structure. But the squatches, let me get my thoughts straight here.
Sure.
When they were knuckle walking, now when a gorilla does it, it has more of an upright posture. You know, the arms are more straight down, and it's just its butt is almost dragging the ground. This was not quite that. To put it to reference with another animal that you can find in the animal kingdom, it looked more like a hyena.
Oh, okay.
Except really exaggerated.
Got it.
You know, they were quadruped. I use the term knuckle walking because everybody has seen videos of gorillas doing that.
Absolutely.
But when you get right down to the nitty gritty, they were just in a quadruped locomotion was all they was. because they were, I tried to describe it without being misleading, but
Sure.
the butt was a lot lower, but it wasn't in an almost upright position like a gorilla is. It was
Makes
just
sense.
dropped down. And with the structure of the legs were shorter than the front arms. Because where it was dropped down and they had the V, but the arms in the front appeared to be longer, which is a standard Squatch thing. They always talk about their long arms hanging way down.
Right.
So, with that characteristic, it wasn't quite the standard ape knuckle walking.
Right.
It looked more like a hyena, but if I say quadruped locomotion, a lot of people don't understand what I'm saying, but that would be the scientific technical term for it.
Okay.
So
your son is into this, you were going to say.
Yeah, when
inherited it, did he?
yeah. When I went to Eastern and got in the anthropology program,
Right.
I made no bones about my experience.
Right
on. As a matter of fact, okay, class, stand up, introduce yourself, say something about you. Hi, I'm Gene. I saw 2 Bigfoots. I made no bones about it. I was not embarrassed. You can call me an idiot if you want to. It makes no skin off my back. So I told all my anthropology classmates knew about it. Matter of fact, I had tried to form the group before I went back to school. Matter of fact, it was so long ago, I had a Yahoo group page that I called Bigfoot in Kentucky. And I invited people to join because I was looking for scientifically minded people. Right. And I let anybody in that wanted to be in, because how do you know about them unless you get to talk to them and everything?
Right.
And there was 2 guys that joined the group that went on to become something in the actual Bigfoot world. I'll let them tell that story, but they do have successful organizations as well. And so anyway, I just kind of let it fall to the wayside because they just wanted to meet and go research. They didn't want to have a game plan or anything. They just wanted to drive to the woods and get out and go looking, which is great.
Sure.
God bless them for, being rambunctious, but that wasn't what I was wanting. So I go to school and I tell all my friends about it because, we're right there with the biologist and the naturalist and the guys getting degrees in various forestry things. And so we're all running together. And behind closed doors in private, quiet moments, yeah, I'm crazy about Bigfoot. I believe it wholeheartedly, but then, no, I don't, that don't happen, So anyway, I was, like I said, I was very adamant about it. And I even had a couple of people approach me about being on talk shows at that time or being in a book or something. And I remember I mentioned one of it to one of my anthropology professors, and they were like, if you want a career at all, you don't touch that. Don't do a thing,
Okay.
So I just kind of backed away at that time. I'm like, okay, don't want this to affect my grade. My story because, but anyway, so we get closer to graduation and I finally find some people that have advanced degrees or fixing to have advanced degrees, and they want to be part of what I'm doing. So we collectively formed the Kentucky Center of Bigfoot Research. So we have, out of all the members that we have, there's one that doesn't have a scientific degree. And that is because she had a face-to-face encounter and she owns a large piece of property that we often get activity on. As a matter of fact, if she sees or hears activity like in September or October, she knows we're going to have a bad winter. It's almost wives' tale-ish, folklore-ish.
Sure.
Did the Sasquatch see his shadow type thing?
Yeah, there you go.
But so, anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. I formed the group and we go out and we've had things happen, We've had howls, wood knocks, everything, but we don't have nothing that absolutely knocks us out until I bring my son and his buddies into the fold.
Oh, cool.
Now, at this time, they're 10 and 11 years old. And they're watching Finding Bigfoot, and I've showed them Legend of Boggy Creek and In Search Of, all the ones that got us interested.
Yeah.
And so they're just gung ho about it. They want to go so bad they can't stand it. So I have a woman contact me and say, "Hey, we were at this spot and we were run out of the woods by something screaming and throwing rocks at us." And I'm like, "Well, this is 5 miles from the house. It's on Berea College land." And I'm thinking, okay, there's no way something is out there, because people go out there and fish, kids go out there and park and party, But I'm like, okay, I'll go. It's a good place to take the boys and just let them have a blast.
Right.
We don't even have to get muddy. The road going to it is paved and it comes to a dead end. So it's in February. It has been raining for 3 days hard. Everything is flooded. It is the first full moon of February. Now that little tidbit of information becomes important later, so remember that. First full moon of February. I take the boys out there because it has finally quit raining and cleared up. It's a nice bright moon. We drive out there. I turn the truck around. We get out. We're up a slough that runs up one end of the lake. And it's about 250, maybe even 300 yards, because the water's so high across this slough. And I get the boys out and I say, "Okay, guys, you know what you want to do. You know how to do it. Knock yourself out." We've got baseball bats. They're banging on trees. They're, making all kinds of calls. And my son goes, "I'm going to do my famous 2 shorts and a long." And so he goes, "Whoop, whoop, woo," real loud. And of course, now remember, they're 10, 11 years old. So they're real high voices, shrill, hits you right there and bores right straight through. And I'm standing there, I'm looking across the lake. And he does that, and I bet it's 3 seconds. There's a rock coming through the air from the other side of the lake.
Dang.
And this rock is somewhere between a good cantaloupe and a basketball. And it's coming from clean across the other side of the lake, arching through the air. And it lands about 20 or 30 foot from me in the water. Now, it hits the water and you get that bloop sound, It went deep, water went high, it rained back down. Yeah. I've had people tell, "Oh, it was a beaver tail slap." No, first of all, I saw the rock coming through the air and seen it hit the water. Secondly, when a beaver smacks the water, that's the sound. And it doesn't make the bloop sound, and you definitely don't get, a full second's worth of water raining back down. You get a little splash and that's it. So I'm like, "Okay, guys, get in the truck for just a minute while I see what's going on, because all I've got on me is a 9mm. I'm not prepared to do battle with the Squatch. This was for the boys to have fun with." So I get them in the truck, and they're hanging out the windows like the Clampetts rolling into Beverly Hills. So I don't even know why I bothered. But I hear what sounds like something come into the water. And it's not splashing or nothing. It's about like just a canoe being shoved through the water. You just hear it. You don't see no evidence of it. You just hear it. There's no wake or nothing. And I've got a pretty good light, but it's a little bit foggy down on the water. The sky is clear, but right along the top of the water, it's foggy. And so I'm shining around. I'm not seeing a thing. And then the movement sounds like it has quit. And I start hearing this tap like noise. And it's kind of hard to describe, but like a bear when it snaps its teeth together. That's what it was sounding like. And so this goes on for maybe 15 minutes after the rock is thrown. And then all goes quiet. Don't hear nothing come out of the water. Nothing. It's just, okay, the event is now over with. And so I get in the truck and we leave, and then the boys, they're kind of freaked out, but once I started the truck and we pulled away, then it was just, they were bouncing off the walls, you know. They're recounting the story, they're calling friends, you know, satellites are hooking up and stuff, you know. It's great. It was really cool to see how their adolescent minds work, you know, piecing it all together with each other, you know, and no, that didn't happen, this happened that way. And so
right
anyway, the next day I call James Fay, Bobo, off of Finding Bigfoot. Or I don't call him, I send him a message. Let me correct that. And I'm like, Bo, this is what happened. Have you ever experienced anything like this? And he said, I've heard that twice. He said, that was a large male knocking his teeth together, and he was pissed off. He said, you were right to leave with the kids. He said, but go back. And I said, I can go back all the time. It's 5 miles from my house. So that whole summer, we went back. If we had 10 minutes of free time, we drove out there. Never had another thing happen that entire summer. Not a tree knock, not a howl, not a rock, nothing. So fast forward to the following February, and I made it a point to go on the night of the first full moon. So we wound up going to our other club members' farm for a little while because she was hearing things. And we did have some activity up there. We heard a howl through the parabolic mic, and we heard some other vocalizations. I can't say they were squatches, but they were something I couldn't identify. So, you know, by this point, the kids are seasoned squatchers now. You know, they're professionals as far as they're concerned. So we leave from there, and it's about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours up to her place. And we drive back to where we had the rock throwing incident. Now, it's the same celestial date, lunar calendar. It's the same date. It's the same pickup truck. It's the same 4 boys that are in that truck. We pull up in the exact same spot. We get out of the truck, and of course, we've been there in the truck for an hour and a half, 2 hours. First thing we got to do is we all got to use the bathroom. So we're standing there doing that. We haven't made a sound, and we get another rock thrown at us.
Jeez.
In the exact same spot from the exact same place. And my son and one of the other boys saw this one. He said it was about the size of a cantaloupe, so it wasn't as big as the one that happened the first time. But there wasn't anything else happened that night. There was no movement in the water, no rock clacking, nothing. It was just a rock throw. And so we like to joke around that he was just saying, hi, I remember you, you know, because it was the exact same scenario, just 1 year later. And he just said hello. And so it was pretty interesting course of events.
No kid.
Yeah.
No kidding.
That's kind of a scary thing, you know. I've often thought about, well, maybe I should take my kids out there, but that whole teeth, you know, chatter, whatever, that's freaky, you know.
Yeah, and usually, honestly, usually I'm better armed than that. Yeah. Because I don't take it lightly, even when it's all of us adults, you know, approaching it in a very scientific manner. I'm still very protective of all of us, you know. So, you know, that evening, like I said, it's 5 miles from my house. It's an area where people go, not in February. There might be the occasional kids out there parking, having a good time or something, but there's not people fishing in February. They're not hiking in February. Like you said in the introduction, I've got some of the best audio recordings we've ever got right here in my backyard. Now, the reason I even bring that up is there is another spot that is 5 miles from my house, and it's also 5 miles from the reservoir where the rock throwing happened. And so it makes a perfect triangle. So I call it the Sasquatch Triangle. But another buddy of mine that does research, he had went to this other area. It's called the Pinnacles. It's a tall mountain, and people hike it all the time. I mean, people come from out of state to hike this trail. So it's very well known. It is very populated, but at the same time, if you get off the trail, it's very dense and desolate. There's not people just wandering through the woods, because we have a lot of copperheads and rattlesnakes around here. So, people aren't just blundering around. But anyway, he takes 2 friends to the top of this mountain, and it's somewhere around 3,000 feet. I don't know the exact height, but they wound up fooling around on top of the mountain longer than he meant to. So it takes about, depending on your health and shape, it could take 2 hours to come off the top of this mountain. So anyway, it gets pitch dark on them before they get off the mountain. But right as they start coming off the mountain, they start hearing bipedal footsteps.
Yeah.
And like I said, my buddy, he does this type of research. He has encountered them before, so he knows what he's listening to. And anyway, they actually made a TV show out of it. That show series, These Woods Are Haunted. They did a whole episode of that. Took the whole hour of the program, or however long it was. Usually there's like 2 stories in each episode, but his was the whole thing. But anyway, they basically escorted them all the way down from the top of the mountain. And the TV show made it seem like there was maybe 2 squatches in the event. But he said when they got to the bottom of the hill and hit the parking lot area, the one that was immediately behind them, or close behind them anyway, he said it let out a whoop. And he said there was 5 more whoops going on up to the top of the mountain. It was like, okay, they're gone. And they just repeated the message all the way up to the top of the hill.
Wow.
But when I first got the audio, the first piece of audio from here at the house, I sent it to him. And I said, what do you think this is? And he said, well, it sounds just like what was screaming at us on the Pinnacles. And that's 5 miles from my house. So I also sent the audio to Cliff Brackman, and he sent it to somebody that was doing a audio study of Bigfoot vocalizations. And he said to begin with, he wanted to write it off as canine. But right at the very end of the yell, he said it done a thing that he calls a Sasquatch signature. He wouldn't tell me what it was, but he said it was there. He said, so in my mind, it was a squatch that you recorded. And what had happened that night, we had burnt some brush in the backyard, and I was walking
down to
in.
3 minutes, by the way.
Oh, see, I told you I could eat up an hour and a half.
Oh boy, you can.
Okay, is there anything you want to ask about?
Well, we need to let people know
have you
how
back?
they can get a hold of you. Yeah, no kidding. Can we have you back?
Sure. I'll come
Okay,
back.
cool.
That's great. That's great. But how can people get a hold of you, or where can they look up your work?
Well, the Kentucky Center of Bigfoot Research has a Facebook page. That's the only social media or web presence that we have. We do not post reports because there's too many other people that are better than we would be at that. They can find me at Gene Brock or Gene Brock Music on Facebook. My phone numbers are listed there. They can call me, they can text, they can email, messenger, whatever they want to do.
Right
Fantastic. Like I said to you earlier, get the Sasquatch juices flowing, and you certainly did, sir. So I thank you for coming on our show.
No problem, guys. No problem.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you, guys.
Yep. And we're going to set you back in the green room. All right, everybody. We got Rob G up next. Thank you very much for showing up, guys. And we'll be here next Friday if I can get the words out of my mouth. Anyway, we will see you later. All right. Have a safe one.